Rett syndrome is a genetic disorder that is characterized by neurologic dysfunction. Patients tend to develop normally until 6 to 18 months of age, after which they start developing signs and symptoms of the disease. In this scene, I'll give you a quick visual mnemonic to help nail Rett syndrome come test day. First, check out the giant mechanized rat in the back of our image. The word rat should help you remember the word Rett. Now let's touch on why the rat is mechanized. See the person controlling the mechanical rat? It's a mech pilot, which should help us remember the mutated gene in Rett syndrome, MECP2. Didn't you know that MECP stands for mech pilot? Come on. Next, take a look at who our rat is battling. It's a dominant X-shaped fighter plane. This large dominant X plane should help you remember that Rett syndrome is inherited in an X-linked dominant fashion. Now turn your attention to the front of the image. See the girl running away from all the fighting? This scene is starting to look a little bit like a Godzilla poster or something. She is a girl, which should help you remember that Rett syndrome is exclusively seen in girls. Now, I know what you're thinking. Shouldn't an X-linked mutation predominantly affect boys? Well, genetically speaking, yes, you're right. In Rett syndrome, however, affected males die in utero or shortly after birth, so only girls are seen with the disease. Just remember our girl running here to remember that Rett syndrome exclusively affects girls. While we're here, also check out how the girl is nervously wringing her hands. Yeah, I bet you'd be wringing your hands too if a giant battle was taking place behind you. This should remind you of the stereotyped hand wringing seen in patients with Rett syndrome. Next, notice where our heroine is running. That's right, she's running right into a taxi to escape. A taxi kind of makes me think of ataxia, which should remind you of the ataxia seen in Rett syndrome patients. While we're here, I also want to take a look at that sputtering exhaust pipe at the back of the taxi. This sporadic sputtering pipe should remind you of the sporadic inheritance pattern typically seen in Rett syndrome. But wait, David, you said Rett syndrome was inherited in an X-linked dominant pattern. Well, this is mostly true, but most patients don't make it to reproductive age. As such, most cases of Rett syndrome are actually due to sporadic mutations. Next, take a look at the shaking building next to all the hubbub. I mean, just look at it shake. All of this shaking reminds me of seizures, which can be seen in patients with Rett syndrome. Now take a look at what's attached to the building. That's right, it's a low clearance sign. This low clearance sign should remind you of the growth failure seen in Rett syndrome patients. Next, notice how all the fighting has knocked over a mile marker sign. You know, the signs you see on highways indicating which stretch of the highway you're on. Anyway, this broken mile sign should remind you of milestone regression. Get it? Recall how I said that Rett syndrome patients usually develop normally at first? Well, at around 6 to 18 months of age, these patients start losing the milestones they've already met. That's right, I'm talking about pediatric developmental milestones, like rolling, walking, etc. Question stems will give you a young girl who's appropriately meeting developmental milestones, after which she starts regressing. Just remember milestone regression and you'll be good to go. But wait, it gets better. This symbol is actually a two-parter. Notice how the milestone sign is actually slightly bent. It's kind of C-shaped. This should remind you of the C-shaped scoliosis that can be seen in patients with Rett syndrome. And that's it for Rett syndrome. Let's recap. Rett syndrome is a genetic disorder caused by mutations in the MECP2 gene. Most cases are caused by sporadic mutations, as patients do not typically reach reproductive age. That being said, patients who do go on to have children pass on the disease in an X-linked dominant pattern. The disease only affects girls, as affected males tend to die in utero or shortly after birth. Patients develop normally until 6 to 18 months of age, after which they start regressing on developmental milestones, aka milestone regression. Clinical features include stereotyped hand wringing, seizures, ataxia, C-shaped scoliosis, and growth failure. And now we're actually done. There's a decent amount of info here, but honestly, you'll maybe get like one question on Rett syndrome come test day. The highest yield stuff is as follows. 1. Exclusively affects females. 2. Stereotyped hand wringing. 3. Milestone regression. And 4. MECP2 mutation. All of the other findings are pretty non-specific and hard to test you on. So if you're in a hurry, just focus on those tidbits. But hey, I get it, you want a 270. Anyway, we'll see you in the next image.